So yeah, I am Cassie. I'm the Executive Director of PNPP, the Providence Neighborhood Planting Program. We are a very small nonprofit here in Providence, Rhode Island, and I'm just going to start by zooming out quickly and giving some context background on who we are and what we do here on the ground in Providence, and then talk a bit about how these tree equity tools have been fitting into that work. So we've been around for about 30 years as a sort of small, narrow in scope program, but over the last 5 years have been looking very closely at how we can expand our programs, our capacity, and our resources here in Providence to address tree inequity and climate change and the public health and justice imperatives that brings. So we have a couple core programs currently that we run, a neighborhood street tree and frontage, front of property yard tree planting program. It's very resident, community driven, and we also have a volunteer community tree stewards program similar to ones in other cities around the country. And all of these programs, we partner with the city and its forestry division very closely to implement. We split the costs 50-50 of all our street tree plantings, and we work very closely with the city forester on planning and implementing these programs. So about 15 or so years ago, Providence did its first tree inventory, street tree inventory, and its first urban tree canopy assessment. And what that did, as as in many other cities around the country, was brought really sharply into focus the issues around canopy distribution and tree inequity. And this was what folks living in neighborhoods instinctively knew. You knew from living in any given part of the city that was true, but we were really starting to see it in maps and start to think about how to address it. And so PNPP began with the city to explicitly prioritize planting in our low canopy neighborhoods. But for a lot of reasons, there's some beautiful elements of our core programs, grassroots engagement and real ownership and investment by community residents. It's led by communities, but that also is often the barrier to addressing inequity. Skews to high home ownership neighborhoods or better resource neighborhoods, doesn't allow us to strategically plant where trees are most needed, et cetera. So we began in around 2017 an organizational strategic planning process to look at how we could start to really grow and address some of these, and realized, oh, actually we need to create an urban forest master plan, and we hadn't done that in Providence, and we wanted to do that very explicitly with an equity lens to it, and also a climate and public health focus. So we are fortunate in Providence that we have our city sustainability office has been working in recent years to bring a really robust equity and anti-racism lens to all of its work and programs. And in late 2019, the city had released a climate justice plan, which is a pretty remarkable. I think it's included as a link in the resources for this webinar. I'd encourage folks to check it out as a side note. But that provided us with a framework and kind of foundation to build our strategic urban forest planning work off of. And so we started to convene a kind of multi-stakeholder, collectively owned tree plan process with a bunch of different folks. And we knew that we wanted to focus that on a couple of, as I said, climate and health, but also to really center frontline communities most impacted by climate change in the process, and to build out collaborative governance models, and to bring a really rigorous analysis of what the sort of data and mapping, and so what was the story of what was happening with trees and how that overlaid with public health, with asthma rates, with heat island effects. And I'm touching on this just because these sort of goals, which we had kind of, we had this vision and this plan before American Forests came to start piloting this work in Rhode Island, but it really, the work they've been doing has synced up in a pretty impressive and exciting way with these goals we have. And so we feel pretty fortunate that we've gotten over the last year and a half to start to test out these tools and incorporate them into this planning process, but also into our kind of programs as they currently exist. So we've been starting to use these tools in a few ways as I think probably the most exciting and immediate and sort of the sexiest one is this tree analyzer, the tool that Chris just demonstrated. We had sort of in static ways overlaid these different data sets, as I think many of you probably have in your communities, and we'd seen other cities that had tools that sort of synthesized them, but to be able to dynamically and sort of responsively and in a customized way show how this, what this looks like in a given neighborhood or project area has been pretty immediately compelling to a lot of people, to our work. So one of the ways, and this is less high-minded, but it already and immediately has proved to be a really compelling tool for making the case to funders about why and where and how we need to be focusing our programs. And those of you on this call who are in the nonprofit sector, I'm sure can appreciate the value of that. And also to decision makers to start to, at the hyper-local level, to show a city councilor in South Providence, just what we're looking at and how this, showing them their neighborhood or their ward and how, and what it looks like and what we think we could do and why we, need their support in funding or mobilizing or helping us, get projects going. That's sort of been immediately useful. And in piloting new sort of planting and stewardship initiatives, we were also fortunate to spend some time digging in with the Climate and Health Menu Guide that Molly discussed up front, which American Forests and NIAC's Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science and Dr. Kathy Wolf had developed and built out, and do a deep dive into that guide and really look at this neighborhood of Upper South Providence, which Chris highlighted in his demo, which this is a neighborhood that in a lot of ways perfectly exemplifies the forces of inequity: low tree canopy, highway relocation and displacement, historic redlining, a toxic industrial port next door, a lot of issues and a lot of barriers. And so we spent a while, both the city and some other local stakeholders and us, PNPP, and some folks from the PVD tree plan, using this neighborhood as just a case study, deep dive, where we really looked through the guide, worked through it with NIACS, looked using the mapping tool at the same time to sort of be exploring and zooming in and zooming out and talking about what impacts, planting might have, looking at other tools and interventions from the climate guide. And it was, it's just the start, but I think we came away from doing that just a couple of months ago really feeling excited for doing that at the neighborhood level around the city, particularly, in sort of priority neighborhoods as we move this planning process forward. And then also just, I think, so we're getting started with our PVD tree plan outreach process is just going to be rolling out this spring and summer. So we're still thinking about all the ways that we will be deploying this, but I think we're already just seeing its value at that, particularly at that neighborhood level, in helping sort of communicate and message, and then actually plan and implement projects. And the one other of these sort of policy suite of tools that we've been testing out, which is interesting and promising, is the City Forest Credits program, which Molly talked about, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, and I know it's been piloted in a lot of parts of the country, less so in the more crowded Northeast, where the scale is different and trickier sometimes to make it work. So we are also working with American Forests and some other local partners to test what that might look like and how we can maybe, focus tree equity efforts using the other tools to do some city forest credit funding streams. So yeah, I think that's it. We're just we've gotten to sort of test out and give feedback as these tools have been developed and are starting to use them, but I think we're excited to see where we're starting to dream and scheme about everything else we can do with them on the ground, and we're excited for that. And I'd encourage you all to check these tools out as well as they roll out more broadly. I think that's it for me.